Hello and welcome back to When Hope Endures with Mabel and Wesley Sellers. Today we have a visitor on the show. We have Brenda with us. She suffered an ischemic stroke when she was 49 years old in 2017. Would you like to share a little bit about kind of what your life was like before the stroke and how it happened with the stroke, how you knew you were having a stroke? And
Okay. Before the stroke happened, I am an attorney by profession, and I was living in North Salt Lake in a different home than I am right now. And I owned my own law firm, which I still do at this point. And I was out with friends the night that the stroke happened, although I've had doctors tell me since then, after the stroke happened, that I actually had been suffering from the stroke for approximately 2 weeks.
wow.
And it was triggered by getting rear ended coming off the freeway in Layton. I was headed to court. And I just had, like, a guy just kind of bumped into me. It didn't even activate my, bags or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we pulled over and exchanged information, and, I had minor damage to my car. But then I went to the hearing and fortunately won.
Okay.
So that's always a good thing. So
Yes.
apparently mentally I was okay then. And but at any rate, I was working full time as an attorney. I was working a lot of hours at that time. I was single and living alone, and I have a very large group of girlfriends that I would hang out with, and occasionally here and there date somebody and that kind of thing, but not a lot of dating. At the day that the stroke became manifested itself was a Saturday, and I had been taking a lot of naps during the day, and I just was kind of tired, which I didn't think anything really of it because, every week I was working. I would work for sure 8 hours a day at the office, but then I would also come home and work typically 1 or 2 hours as well.
You were an
So
attorney with your own law firm.
exactly.
It was okay to be tired.
Exactly. So it was okay to take naps on Saturday.
Right.
And so later that evening, I went to a play in Salt Lake over at Pioneer Theater Company, and we had gone to eat beforehand. And a lot of my friends and that kind of thing will have wine or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I thought, no, I'm not going to because I'd been so tired all day long. I thought I'm not going to have any alcohol to drink. So I just had a Diet Coke and we had dinner and, a Thai restaurant. And then we all went over to the play. When we got over to the playhouse, my vision started bouncing. And, I've never had anything happen before or after that incident similar to that. And I mean, I could see just fine, but my vision was kind of bouncing. And I was telling my friends as we were about to sit down at the play that I was having this problem, and one of my friends thought I was having a silent migraine. And I said, well, I've never had anything like that. I didn't take anything or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, it's one of those deals where you're sitting literally in the middle of the theater when this all happens. And as the play is starting, all of a sudden my left hand starts going numb, where I just can't move it. And literally, I was sitting there thinking, I had no idea what was happening because I've never met anybody who has had a stroke. I've got a
Mm-hmm.
grandfather that I didn't really have any contact with who had had a stroke when he was much older, but I didn't know what any of the symptoms were.
Right.
And so I was sitting in the middle of the theater and thinking, this is not normal. What's going on here? And I leaned over to my friend because I thought, well, can I make it to intermission? Because, I don't want to excuse myself in front of all these people watching the play. So I'm trying to be polite, even though I'm having a major event in my life. And I just looked at my friend and I said, hey, I'm not feeling well. I'm going to leave. And she said, do you want me to come with you? And I said, oh, no, it's fine. So I was able to still walk at that point, and I got out of the theater, and It's hard because I was with four of my friends, and every one of those four friends have felt very guilty for not following me out. Um, and I just called my mom, who lives in Murray, and I said, Mom, I need Dad to take me to the hospital. I don't know what's going on, and typically my parents are not the type that you go to the doctor ever or you go to the
Hmm.
hospital. But for whatever reason, something about what I was telling my mom, she immediately says, George, you need to go to you need to go get Brenda over at the theater. I had driven. I don't know why I didn't just drive myself. I was still okay to drive. And my hand was kind of coming and going. I ended up talking to my sister, and I was talking to her with the phone. I was holding the phone with my left hand at that point. And at one point, my hand just starts dropping. And I mean, I didn't drop the phone, but my hand just starts to drop,
Hmm.
like it won't hold the phone. And I mean, my dad made record time from Murray to Salt Lake. And when I got in the car, he said, "Which hospital do you want to go to?" Because obviously I'm at the University of Utah, but I've never even had to think about what hospital do I need to go to with my insurance. And
Right.
I said, well, maybe let's go to LDS because, I have Select Health.
Hmm.
And so he had to look up the address so we knew where to find, LDS hospital. And I walked into the hospital. I was able to still walk at that point. And the lady says to me, well, what are you here for? And I said, well, I think I'm either having a heart attack or a stroke. And bam, the doors open up and they get me in right away. And I had to use the bathroom at one point when I was at the hospital. And I started walking, and then all of a sudden my left leg started dragging, like it wasn't fully moving at that point. And I remember the doctor looked at me and said, what's going on? And I said, I have no idea. That's why I'm here. And I mean, even then they didn't say, hey, we think you're having a stroke. And I mean, of course, they wanted my credit card right away, so
Hmm.
I could pay for expenses.
Yeah.
Um,
And you were completely
yeah.
there, mentally
Yeah,
there,
mentally.
then nothing.
Yeah, mentally, I
No
was.
headaches, no nothing.
No, I didn't have any
Wow.
kind of headache. My vision wasn't doing the, bouncing thing it had been doing earlier. I wasn't having that problem. I was still at least upright and able to walk. And so, for whatever reason, I had to go to the bathroom because I even went to the bathroom while I was over at the theaters, even before my dad showed up. But any rate, I just remember them taking my credit card and saying, well, we need to take you into surgery right away. And so they took me into surgery to do a stent at LDS Hospital. And so I had a stent that apparently they were hoping to alleviate whatever was going on, and it didn't work.
Hmm.
So that day they said, well, we're going to transport you now to IHC in Murray. And, because they have a specialty unit there and that kind of thing. And I spent 4 days in ICU. And, um, I have very little memory of the 4 days that I was in ICU, other than I remember there was a very nice nurse, that helped me eat and that kind of thing. And then they wanted to put me in a specialized rehab facility. So IHC in Murray has it's a neuro unit on the 12th floor at the hospital.
Okay.
And so my sister, because my mom wasn't feeling very well at the time, so my sister is a couple years younger than I am. And my dad toured the unit and talked to the people and said, yeah, we think this is, the best move for her. So they transferred me up after the 4 days, and I spent a couple months in the hospital at that point. And, I did physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy every day
Mhm.
that I was there. And, they have fabulous staff. But, so I did all that. When I was in the hospital initially, when I kind of came to and I was on the 12th floor, I had absolutely no movement on my left side. So I couldn't move my couldn't move my leg or my foot or my arm or my hand or anything like that. So I was paralyzed all on one side. I don't know if you want me to go into the kinds of therapy that they did.
We'll continue with that in a minute. I do have a couple questions
Okay.
with the hospital visit prior to that. Did they do an MRI or any type of scan to verify that it was a stroke prior to the stint, or was it after the stint? Or
I had quite a few MRIs through this whole process. I know they did one while I was at LDS Hospital,
okay.
and then they did another one I know while I was in Murray at the hospital there as well. And then I've had various ones as well because I've had 3 surgeries since this all happened. And so they've done MRIs to kind of evaluate what's going on with my brain and those kinds of things. But yeah. So I've had that. I've had CAT scans. I've had you name it. I've had it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was kind of curious how, with going in there, how they worked for the diagnosis. I mean, definitely you had a lot of the signs.
Yeah.
Also, it's interesting that you had mentioned like you knew that these were signs of a stroke, but yet a lot of times I think they get dismissed because, I mean, 49 is still pretty young.
Yeah.
You don't think of having a stroke at 49.
No, and I've always historically, been very healthy, and I've never really had any major issues, and so I have no idea what the situation was when this all happened. I have since been diagnosed with fibromuscular dysplasia, which apparently, according to the neurologist that I had, it's an incurable disease that I was probably born with and makes me prone to having another stroke. So, I mean, obviously, when she called and told me, the diagnosis, at that point, I was living with my parents and I was just crying because I thought, I can't go through this process again.
Right.
And, what if it happened to be a right-sided affected stroke? And then I can't move either side or something like that because, I've really been left with limited movement on my left upper extremities. It's my, leg that's come back better than anything. But yeah, so it was just devastating to hear that news. And then, of course, my sister was worried that, what if she has it and they won't test her for it. And we don't know whether or not my mom since passed away, and we don't know if my mom had it at all, or if my dad has it. We don't know. So they said that they won't test for it unless you actually have a stroke, and then they'll test for it.
So even if there's family history of it, they still test for it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the
And with a stroke, something that I didn't realize until after my Mabel had gone through one was how many different symptoms there can be.
Oh yeah.
And they're so different for every person. It took me a while to realize that there was 2 different types of strokes as well, with the hemorrhagic and the ischemic stroke, and this was an ischemic stroke that you had. But some people get the paralysis that you had, others it's more manifest through whether it's aphasia, so the speech center of the brain, or vision. I find it interesting that you didn't have any headaches associated with this, because a lot of times we associate strokes with headaches, and it would be easy to dismiss it and think, oh, well, it's not something in my head. It must not be a stroke because I don't have a headache.
Yeah.
So it's good to, I mean, not good, but important to know that any of the signs we need to recognize, even if we don't have all of them.
Right.
So along with the paralysis, you didn't have any like vision, other than the bouncing of the vision at that time, there was no vision affected through the stroke, or?
No impairment of vision. At one point while I was in the hospital, I thought that my vision wasn't as good as it had been. I had laser surgery years ago. And, I'd always been accustomed to not having glasses at that point. And then I thought, well, my vision seems crappy all of a sudden. So I didn't even know this person exists, but they have a neurological ophthalmologist. So you probably know,
Yeah,
'cause
I've
you've
gone
gone to
through
one
that.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had no idea that kind of person existed, but I went to a neurological optometrist or ophthalmologist, and the result was, oh, I'm sorry, you're almost 50 years old. You're just getting older. This is your problem.
Okay.
So it turns out it had nothing to do with the stroke, although I also have a occupational therapist that specializes in vision issues, and they were concerned about me because my stroke was a left-sided affected stroke. They were concerned about me having left-sided neglect. And so I really wanted to be driving again at some point. And
Right.
so my occupational therapist, who specializes in vision issues, gave me different exercises to do and different things to make sure that I would be, okay. And I mean, even now I will make sure that I'm, like mentally, I have to look to the left. Occasionally I'll have a
Right.
situation where I'll be startled that something came up on my left side that, I haven't noticed. Do you have that problem?
Yes, but I have it with my right side.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you mentioned the left side neglect, because I hadn't heard about that until with my Bell's stroke, with the loss of the vision on the right hand side. The occupational therapist we were seeing said, "You're lucky it's on the right hand side because the left hand side often gets neglected when it comes to vision."
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard about that till that time, and so it's interesting that they had mentioned that with you as well. So.
They wanted people to sit on my left side, so I'd be forced to turn and look at them, and those kinds of things.
That happens to me too. I have people talking to me, and I'm like, oh wait, you were talking to me? You're right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about with speech? Because sometimes the stroke will affect speech, whether it's the ability to talk or just the ability to choose words, as it can spark aphasia.
Well, I mean, and
individuals.
obviously for me, it was, critical that I have the ability to speak because I work as an attorney and I do a lot of courtroom work.
Yeah.
And, so that would have just been devastating for me. I mean, I knew people when I was in the hospital that their career was just, they couldn't do what they had previously done. One of the other guys that was in there had a stroke, and he was a tile layer, and he was having similar paralysis type issues with his left side. And he said, well, I'm not going to be able to do this. Or I have friends that have had strokes that now they're on disability. So fortunately for me, I was able to talk the entire time. I did have some early symptoms of aphasia in terms of speaking really slowly. Like, I don't know if you had this problem, but I used to sing in the car all the time. And for some reason, I'd get in the car and I'd think, why aren't I able to kind of sing in the car now?
Yeah.
And I don't really, even to this day, I don't really do it very often. Yeah, so I had a little bit of it. And in fact, of all the therapies that I had, I had a speech therapist that would come in and have me do various, logic problems and those kinds of things. But I just didn't really find it that valuable. They wanted me to do crossword puzzles or they, that kind of thing. And I just thought, I feel fine. And I thought mentally, thank God I was fine. But unfortunately he's passed away, but I had a client that I was good friends with as well. And I talked to him on the phone after the stroke happened, and maybe like even a year out, and he says to me, "Your voice sounds so much better than when I talked to you earlier on." And he said, "You sound like you're back to your old self." And I don't know what it sounds like all the time. I mean, I hear myself talk about it. But my family thinks that I'm much more quiet after this has happened to me than I was before. Did you have that issue too?
Well, I've heard a lot of people that, yeah, that after the stroke, that everybody gets very quiet. And they're, well, you used to be very outgoing. What happened to you?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
I'm much more so. And I mean, even sometimes crowds kind of bother me at this point. And, I don't want to be in too much of a crowd. Sunlight bugs me, so I always have my sunglasses with me. But yeah, so it definitely changed a few things in that regard. But fortunately, I could still speak. I didn't have problems finding words. I was obsessed, frankly, with making sure mentally I was fine. So even when I was in the hospital, I was still doing some work. I still had to do billing for 2 months in a row while I was in the hospital. And
that's really good, because I don't even know till this day what was my room number.
Oh, really?
I couldn't say it. I couldn't.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, this is your number. Tell me. And I would say something else.
Yeah, you're like,
I don't know.
Yeah, and that's the problem is you don't know what, you don't even understand the nature of what's going on to you, going on. I had two, like after I was released from the hospital, I had two not psychological, but cognitive tests. I had a cognitive test a year after I had the stroke. And then I had another one the second year after I'd had it, because I mean,
you wanted to see how much you progressed.
Yes. And I needed to, know from just even my ability to help clients and that kind of thing. I didn't want to be compromised in my intellect, so then I wasn't able to sort of mentally help them. Because one of my other friends, I don't know if I mentioned in my paperwork, but I volunteer now over at the hospital on the floor that I actually was residing in for 2 years, or for 2 months. And so I have other friends that have had strokes that are in the group, the volunteer group as well. And my friend Bill has had a right-sided affected stroke, and so his manifests itself not physically but more mentally, and he can just be exhausted if he does too much in one day. Like he'll just have to go home and sleep and that kind of thing. And I mean, I certainly had the exhaustion symptoms for quite a while, but fortunately at this point I feel like they've gone away, and like I have my stamina back, and my I can keep going, and I can do whatever I need to do work-wise from a stamina perspective and an intellectual perspective.
Yeah. So I think that part's amazing.
Yeah.
Being able to return to your previous occupation without having a cognitive barrier there.
Yeah.
So, a topic that isn't that important, but I want to talk about hospital food for a minute.
Oh,
right. So
horrible. Should I tell you how much weight I lost while I was there?
It took 2 weeks before they would let Mabel eat solid food, because they were worried about choking. Can she swallow?
Yeah.
Speech therapist kept evaluating that. So did they have you on pretty much non-solids for a while?
Yeah, everything had to be thickened. Like even they did thickened water, and I thought,
thickened water?
Oh my God, that was horrible. And somebody brought me a Jamba Juice, and it was one of those deals where they're like, okay, well this is you've got a swallow issue. But one of my friends brought me a Jamba Juice, and I was all like drinking it down.
Give it to me.
The nurse came in and she's like, what are you doing? So they had to take it away from me. It was delicious. But yeah, I had to have a swallow test done. They had to do some kind of x-rays on my vocal cords, and my sister still tells the story all the time. She's like, I said to him, how long is this going to last? And they're like, we don't know, it could be forever. And my sister was like, what? So yeah, because I'm not, I kind of like to fancy myself kind of a foodie, and I thought, oh, I cannot be eating pudding for the rest of my life.
No.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. No. It was a very good day when I passed the swallow test.
Yes, we had. I asked it because it was kind of funny because, like I said, 2 weeks they had her on that liquid, or not really liquid, but very soft food. And they had seen that she was fine to swallow, but they just didn't check that box off.
Yeah.
So we finally had a nurse that kind of smuggled her in a sandwich so she could have something to
Yeah.
eat, because the nurse
Yeah.
had seen that she was okay. And I mean, some of the food they were giving her that was supposedly easy to eat was more of a choking hazard
It was
than
that
the food that they were trying to keep her from.
really hard French toast.
Yeah, cut into these little pieces, but they were all rubbery. And I'm like, if you're going to choke, it's going to be on that, not the food they
Yeah.
want to keep you away from. So I always find it interesting to see people's experience with that type of.
Did you drop a lot of
diet.
weight too?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just had a baby
Oh.
like 10 days
Prior to the.
before.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
And so nurses will come like, oh, how do you do it? Now you're skinny again. I'm like, you want to know how I did it? I'm here. You know?
Yeah. You're like, I really don't want to have
Yeah.
this is my weight loss plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, they kept saying to me, you need to eat something because I don't know if you were at Intermountain, but oh my gosh, they could ruin eggs there. And I thought, this is not a regular egg.
Well, I was afraid of asking for food because
Oh,
of the
really?
same thing that I couldn't read.
With the aphasia, you didn't know it was. You didn't want to say the wrong thing.
Yeah, or not like it. So I just stuck with the French toasts.
Every day.
Yeah. I think it was pancakes one day. French toast and pancakes for breakfast. And the Southwest salad for dinner.
And that was more in rehab.
Yeah.
W-
I
So
couldn't.
my mom was at the University of Utah Hospital.
Okay.
And I guess the hospital was somewhat all right with the food, but the rehab facility there at the University of Utah have a whole different food department,
Uh-huh.
and the food there was actually pretty good. So finally, when she got moved into rehab, she could eat food that was,
Tasty.
had some flavor to it.
I ate a ton of fruit, and I mean, they kept saying to me, you really need to be eating something because I think I dropped, while I was in the hospital just for 2 months, I dropped 15 pounds. So,
Yeah, I think the same.
yeah, I was just, I mean, it was much thinner than I am even now. But
Wow.
yeah, it was and the food was horrible, I thought, most of the time. And then when I went to the transitional rehab after the hospital, that food was even worse. My dad's like,
Oh,
oh,
no.
this is- oh, it was horrible. My dad would lift up the little silver, thing, and he'd be like, oh, no wonder you're not really eating here.
Oh no. Yeah, that's why I was afraid of tasting other things. So that's I'm like, okay, I know I like this. I stay with it.
That's all you're eating.
Yeah.
The exact same food every day.
Yeah.
Especially where that's really important. I
Yeah.
kind of talk jokingly about the food and the nutrition there at the hospital, but your body's going through a lot of recovering. It's using up a lot of the nutrients and your strength
Yeah.
to repair any broken vessels in the brain. And especially when you start your physical therapy, occupational therapy, it's using a lot of that energy. So the nutrients or food that you put in is very important at that point into the recovery. And so it doesn't really help when
Yeah.
the food's not really palatable.
Yeah. Exactly.
We appreciate going over this part. We'll next time or next episode, we'll talk about the time in rehab, some of the exercises and everything they did with you.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.